Welcome to the Early Rising Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblyman DeLong.
Present.
Assemblyman De Silva.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblyman Gurr.
Here.
Assemblyman Hibbets. Assemblyman Koenig. Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblyman Wynn.
Here.
Assemblywoman Taylor.
Present.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
And Chair Torres.
Welcome to the audience in Carson City and those joining us by video conference in Las Vegas and listening over the internet. Just a couple housekeeping items. As a reminder, please remember to silence all of your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you are done speaking. Handout should have already been provided to our committee staff, and electronic copies should have been submitted to our committee manager by noon yesterday for members of the committee. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with another person's position. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We are going to take the agenda a little out of order. We are going to begin with a work session, and then we will go on to the hearing for AB 219. Okay. I didn't realize that the assemblywoman was here. We were looking for. All right, we'll continue to go with the work session. I think it should be a pretty quick work session, although we do have a number of bills on the list today. Today, we will conduct a work session to take action on measures the committee has heard in previous meetings. It is not customary for the committee to take testimony or otherwise rehear the bills during a work session. However, I may invite a witness to come forward for clarification or questions during our consideration of a measure. We will start with AB 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jennifer Rudy. I'm the committee policy analyst for the committee, and as a nonpartisan Legislative Council Bureau staff, I don't advocate for or against legislation. I'm just here to walk you through the work session. So the first bill has probably the shortest summary. It is Assembly Bill 3, requires the state controller to prepare a complete financial report of the state permanent school fund annually instead of quarterly, and there were no amendments presented. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions? No, there was pretty good control in that presentation. I'll entertain a motion on AB 3.
Second.
I apologize, who made the motion? Assemblyman Taylor made the motion, and then a second from Assemblyman DeLong. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, this motion does pass. And then I'm going to go ahead and assign the floor statement to Assemblyman MacArthur. First one in the Government Affairs Committee. He'll get at least 2 today. All right, we will now go ahead and continue with AB 33. Ms. Rudy?
Thank you. This is Jennifer Rudy again. Assembly Bill 33 expands the authorized investments for money in the state permanent school fund to include certain commercial paper issued by certain corporations, trusts, and limited liability companies organized and operating in the United States, and depository institutions licensed by the United States, and certain notes, bonds, and other unconditional obligations issued by certain corporations organized and operating in the United States or depository institutions licensed by the United States. A judicial determination that such an investment does not violate the Nevada Constitution is required before such investment. The measure revises provisions governing money transferred from the fund to a corporation for public benefit to provide private equity funding to certain businesses. The measure revises the authority of the state treasurer to invest money from the general portfolio of the state in certain categories of bonds and other securities. Finally, the measure revises the provisions related to the authorized investments for local government and certain administrative entities. There were no amendments presented.
Members, any questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on AB 33. I heard a motion from the Vice Chair. Do I have a second? And a second from Assemblyman Hibbets. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And I will assign that floor statement to Assemblyman Nguyen. All right, we will go ahead and continue with AB 36.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy again. Assembly Bill 36 adds 3 ex officio members to the Interagency Council on Veterans Affairs. 1, the Attorney General, 2, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and 3, the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. The measure revises certain reporting requirements for certain state agencies and regulatory bodies and deletes the requirement that the council develop and administer a fellowship program to increase research on improving outcomes for veterans and servicemen and servicewomen and their families. The measure changes from calendar years to fiscal years the reporting timeline for certain reports that are submitted to the council and the Nevada Veterans Services Commission. The measure further revises certain outreach and reporting requirements related to the Women Veterans Advisory Committee. There were no amendments presented.
Members, any questions? I'll entertain a motion on AB 36. To do pass on AB 36. All right, Assemblyman Thomas. Is there a second? Second. All right, I heard a second quickly from Assemblyman Gonzalez. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And I will assign that floor statement to Assemblyman De Silva. All right, we will go ahead and continue with AB 44.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 44 revises the titles of the Deputy Directors of the Department of Veterans Services and certain duties of the Director of the Department. The measure further requires that certain training be provided by a veteran service organization located in the state. However, the Department of Veterans Services did provide the attached amendment, and that is to instead continue providing the semi-annual training, to provide quarterly the training to each veteran service officer employed by the department and each veteran service officer accredited by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and employed by a veteran service organization accredited by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. So instead of shifting that responsibility for the training, they are keeping that responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any questions? At this time, I'll entertain a motion to do pass on as amended and do pass. I apologize on AB 44. I heard a motion from Assemblyman Gonzalez, and I have a second from Assemblyman Taylor. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries, and I'll go ahead and assign that floor statement to Assemblyman Thomas. All right. Next, we will consider AB 82.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 82 requires the governor to proclaim annually the last Saturday in October as World Esports Day. The proclamation shall call upon news media, educators, business, and labor leaders, and certain government officers to bring to the attention of the residents of Nevada the trailblazing Nevada esports community and its contributions to the state, as well as the building of exciting careers in electronic sports, such as broadcasting, graphic arts, web design, video game design, coaching, athletics, and community building. And there were no amendments presented.
Members, any questions? At this time, we'll entertain a motion to do pass. I heard the motion from Assemblyman Nguyen. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblyman De Silva. At this time, is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, please say yay. Oh, that's weird. I apologize. My first time, I'm just reading the script, and it actually says yeah. I'm just saying. Any opposed, please say nay. Looks like there is none, so this motion does carry. And I'll go ahead and assign that floor statement to Assemblyman Mosca. And we will go ahead and continue with AB 113.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 113 creates the Office of Early Childhood Systems within the Office of the Governor and prescribes the duties of the office. The Governor shall appoint a person who is knowledgeable of the field of early childhood systems to serve as the director of the office. The measure appropriates from the State General Fund to the office approximately $150,000 in each fiscal year of the 2023 to 2025 biennium. There was a friendly amendment provided by Children's Advocacy Alliance through the bill sponsor. And that should be on Nellis and in your work session document. There are 5 key provisions of the amendment. I'm not sure if you wanted me to walk you through that or not. Thank you.
I believe that members have had time to review the document. I know that Assemblywoman Thomas did have her staff send that out to us yesterday as well. At this time, I'll go ahead and just ask if members have any specific questions about the document or the amendment or the bill. It appears that there are no questions. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to amend and to pass. I heard the motion from Assemblywoman Thomas. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblywoman Gurr. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And then I have Assemblywoman DeLong who opposes. Anybody else? Just make sure I get those. Okay. All right, and I will find the floor statement to Assemblywoman Thomas. Thank you, and we're going to go ahead and continue with AB 140.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 140 makes Juneteenth Day a legal holiday in Nevada rather than a day of observance. The measure further requires that Juneteenth Day is to be observed on June 19th, or the Monday following if June 19th falls on a Sunday, or the Friday preceding if June 19th falls upon a Saturday. The measure makes a conforming change to account for the closure of state, county, and city governmental offices for Juneteenth Day. There were no amendments presented. However, the bill sponsor, Assemblywoman Thomas, has asked that an amendment to include Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch as a sponsor be considered by the committee. Thank you.
Members, any question? Okay, at this time, we'll entertain a motion to amend and do pass. I heard the motion from Assemblywoman Duran, and the second from Assemblywoman Taylor. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I might, I will vote to pass out of committee, but I want to reserve my right to change my vote on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. This motion does carry, and I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Thomas. And then lastly, we're considering AJR 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jennifer Rudy again. Assembly Joint Resolution 1 urges the United States Department of Veterans Affairs to study the effectiveness and use of hyperbaric oxygen therapy for veterans and share the results with the state of Nevada. There were no amendments presented.
Members, any questions? I did actually have a question for the bill sponsor. Would he be able to explain what hyperbaric oxygen therapy is at this time?
You want to know what hyperbaric oxygen therapy is?
Yeah, just a clarification.
It's basically having pure oxygen go into your system, and you have to do that in a room that's completely kept in, or you have to put a mask on so you don't have any other air getting in there anyway. And you put pressure on there at about 3 times the normal pressure that you would have, so you get all that pure oxygen coming into your system.
Thank you, members. Any additional questions? No, I think that clarification really helped. At this time, we'll entertain a motion on AJR 1. I heard the motion from Assemblyman Gurr. Do I have a second? I have a second from Assemblyman Hibbett. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any additional comments, Assemblyman? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And I will assign this floor statement to, well, I guess I have to assign it to our good friend Assemblyman MacArthur. You know, I have to say, today was a miracle because I think this is the first, I used to sit on every committee with Assemblyman MacArthur. And I don't think I've ever sat through a work session and seen him vote in support of every single work session. So either something's changed, it's like the Grinch had found his heart, or it's just, we have much better policy this legislative cycle. Thank you. Congratulations, committee members are completing our first work session in the hardest working and early rising committee on government affairs. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the bill hearing on AB 219, which makes various changes to open meeting law. And please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Torres, Vice Chair Duran, and members of the Government Affairs Committee. My name is Venetia Considine. I am lucky enough to represent Assembly District 18 in Southeast Las Vegas with a little bit of Henderson. Thank you for the opportunity today to present on Assembly Bill 219. I want to talk a little bit about the history of this bill. Last session, I was lucky enough to be on the Government Affairs Committee, and I was asked to carry AB 253, which was a committee bill. AB 253 last session was on the open meeting law. That bill was created as a response to the COVID session and to the remote technologies. One of the things that we learned through that session across the state was that remote technologies gave people who hadn't had direct access to government officials access that they hadn't had before. So the bill and intent of AB 253 last session was to expand those options for people and to put them into the law so that anyone would be able to take part in a meeting, an agenda, the legislature, wherever, from wherever they were in the state of Nevada. I want to point out that AB 253 in the last session passed unanimously through both houses. However, during the interim, I was contacted by folks across the state from all different levels and areas who talked about issues that they believed stemmed from AB 253. And this bill is an attempt to balance some of those issues and meet some of those requests of that bill. One thing I want to point out is before AB 253, the law allowed remote meetings, and AB 253 did not change that, nor does AB 219 change that. Remote meetings have always been allowed in Nevada law. Also, there is an amendment. I hope you all received it, and as I go through this bill, I will also talk about the amendment. I am aware that there is opposition to this bill. I'm hoping some of the amendments resolve that opposition, but I am happy to meet and work with anyone who has oppositions to see if we can find resolutions and make this bill successful. So on section 1, the intent of this section, the intent of the change and the intent of the amendment was in response to multiple day or extended meetings that went, let's say, on one week and then were continued to a next week, or ended and picked up on another day. And what I heard from many people is in some of those meetings, they were not allowed to make, or there was no option to make public comments. So if there was a meeting and then a weekend went by or multiple days went by and the meeting then continued, the only public comment would be on that first day. So the intent of the change on this and the amendment, which I will read, is to give the public the opportunity to make public comment when a meeting has a pause in between that is more than just a weekend or a day. So sections 1 through 3, those changes just refer to when someone can make a public comment. But I am asking with the amendment to remove subsections 4 and 5. I believe because that it was a little confusing, and to just change it with the wording, if a public body holds a meeting agendized for multiple consecutive days, the public body must allow general public comment on any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item at some point during each meeting day. The public body may restrict individual comments to a single opportunity for comment on non-agendized items during the course of multi-day meetings. So the change here for the amendment would require general public comment on each day. However, the protection would be, it would not allow individuals to make the same comment each day of a multi-day meeting. This is a consideration for bodies that have multiple days of meetings. It would allow a body to have only one period for items on the agenda at the beginning of the first day, but then protect them from hearing or from time being used for somebody saying the same comment every day. And I'm sure there's questions on that, so I'm happy to answer those questions when we get to that section, or when we get to that point. The next section, on section 2, section 2, sub 8, I believe that is duplicative. I believe we already have in the statute that where there is a telephonic participation is already required, and that is duplicative and is not needed. So that's why I'm asking that. Also, on section 2, 4, sub A, top of page 6, posting of a copy of the notice, the additional language, and if the meeting has a physical location, to have posting of that notice in the building where the meeting is held. This came from, specifically from folks in Clark County who were requesting that notices of, for example, town boards, meetings like that, where those meetings were going to be held, that the notice be also posted in the location where those meetings would be held, specifically community centers, rec centers, areas of those. It's my understanding that there is some opposition to that, and I am happy to talk to those in opposition to possibly narrow or find a resolution for this section. Moving on to section 3, sub 4. This was an area where I received the most feedback during the interim. I heard a lot of this feedback, and again, let me preface all of this with saying this is feedback that I have heard about. I'm not going to go through specific instances or anecdotes of where this happened. This was just feedback that was brought to me, that there has been some issues where there was no access to members on a board or commission. If all of the meetings were completely held remotely, I was told of issues with not knowing how to call in because they didn't know where to find a notice, just sort of issues about access to the folks that sit on some of these, on any of these boards, commissions, panels, all of this. So the wording that is put in here is an attempt to find a balance between everybody's interests on here. So the wording itself, the initial idea was to require the member or the position, because I know members can change throughout a calendar year, just that member or that position for that board or commission seat, whatever that is, to physically attend 25% of the meetings in a year. So the example would be if that board met 4 times in a year, that position or that member would need to attend 1. The idea being then there would be at least one per year, or potentially if there was a statewide board that met in the north and the south, then when those meetings were held in the south, somebody in the south can attend. That would be the requirement. If there was north, and it would cut down on travel. That was the goal for this, was just to help provide additional access. I've made an additional amendment on this to make it clear that this would be for voting members, not for non-voting members, that it would be a calendar year so that we would know where that time period would begin and end. And I believe those were the changes that I made for that section and my reasoning for those. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that the law already says that you can have a remote meeting. This is an attempt to find a balance for people to get access to their representatives or to someone who is speaking on something that they have an interest and an opinion on, and that this is an attempt to balance those interests. I know that was a lot of information, went through it fairly quickly. Happy to answer any questions, but also understand and plan on meeting with additional stakeholders to see if we can come to a resolution on a lot of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. It's good to have you back in the hardest working committee on government affairs. Hopefully, this reminds you how hard we work here in this committee. Members, any additional questions? Assemblyman Taylor, and then Assemblyman DeLong. And then
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Assemblywoman. Welcome, thank you for the presentation. I have a question. You mentioned the multiple day meetings and the requirement that if a meeting goes from one day to the next day, that there's a public comment period on the second day, right? That was like, but yeah.
Venetia Considine, for the record, that was what was initially brought to me on this section, was that if there was, the issue was if there was a break, multiple day break, that there were additional public comment opportunities. So that was the initial request.
And that, thank you for that clarification. And I got a little confused because I thought that it's required to have a public comment at the end of the meeting anyway. I'm reading the proposed changes, and I'm saying, let me be specific. Section 1, subsection 1, A.
Venetia Considine, for the record, I believe that that was already in the law, and this was just an attempt to do it for the meetings for the multiple days, because on the top of page 5, that lined out section, I believe that was already in it, and that says the same thing, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like, if I may, Madam Chair? Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Yeah, and I think what I'm trying to, thank you for that, and I think you're right, I think it is the same, might even be the exact same language, which is okay. But I thought as it reads that the general public comment must be taken at the beginning of the meeting, before any items of which the action may be taken or heard, and again before the adjournment of the meeting. Right, and that was like a cut and paste. So if that's the case, if it's taken again before the adjournment of the meeting, or just for clarity, because that sounded duplicative, but you're saying, could they actually, in theory, could do both of those on the first day? And then that would leave none for the second day. So what this says is one of them, or an additional one, still has to be on the second day. Am I getting that?
For the record, Venetia Considine, thank you, Assemblywoman Taylor, for the question, and yes.
I think so. Yeah,
And thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it, yes.
Yes, got it. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, may I go straight to the, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Assemblyman DeLong?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on, I guess it'd be section 2, 4A, page 6, top of page 6, where you said you would receive some pushback on that. Trying to understand what the problem with that is. What are you hearing that's causing someone angst about it?
For the record, Venetia Considine, thank you for the question, Assemblyman DeLong. I believe there is an opposition on Nellis specifically to this. So, and that's what I'm referring to. So I saw that, I believe, this morning and wanted to just mention and acknowledge that I've read that and am willing to work with someone on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Gur.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions, if you don't mind. On the bottom in section 3-4, you have that they have to attend 25% of the meetings. What are you going to do if they don't? That's question one.
Thank you for the question, Venetia Constein, for the record. Yes, that is something that has brought up, is how, is what would happen if somebody doesn't do that. Part of that attempt was to change it from having it be on the member to having it on the position, because one of the comments that I heard was that you can have a member that is not there for the whole year, and then does that fall on somebody who was only there for the last meeting, or what those issues are. That is something that I intend to work on with other folks that are more expert at open meeting law, along with the Attorney General's office, but I don't have an answer to that yet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I know that on most commissions in the state, there are requirements that you attend so many meetings. And I know that on the local boards and commissions I've been on in Elko, it's like if you miss 3 a year, you're out. So could we maybe look at that and tie that all together to the same type of thing?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Gurr, Venetia Constein, for the record. And Madam Chair, this button doesn't work very well. I wanted to do a balance, so this is a floor. So there's no reason that it can't go higher, but not everyone meets multiple times a year. There's so many variations of all of this across the state that just wanted to do something that was minimal. Open to doing a higher number, but finding that balance with everyone agreeing is difficult.
One more, if you don't mind. Why not put in there that before the start of every meeting agenda, even if it's a 3-day meeting, that you have public comment before and after, before you close the meeting that day? Because you have to close it at the end of the day and you have to open it. Why not that way?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Venetia Constein. Like that idea as well. I'm happy to discuss it and talk with other stakeholders to see whether or not that is feasible to have buy-in from everyone on something like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Additional questions? I think Assemblyman Koenig?
So I have extensive experience with open meeting law when I'm on a 3-man county commission and you can't talk to anybody else about anything except in public meetings. It makes things a little bit difficult. So when I was reading through this bill, I mean, the bill talks about open meeting laws, it talks about the remote locations, it talks about the having to have public comment. And then we get to section 3.4 and it talks about having to be at 25% of the meetings. It didn't seem to fit to me. I mean, the whole bill is about open meeting law, and then at the end we say everyone has to attend 25%. I'm not against that. I think that should be the bare minimum, but I just didn't quite see where that section 3's for it. To me, it wasn't a natural flow with the rest of the bill. Can you just maybe talk about that just a little bit?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Koenig. Venetia Constein, for the record. I am not an expert in open meeting law, so the way that I viewed this bill with the feedback that I got was that it was about access. One of the other things that I didn't talk about is verbally stating how someone can call into a meeting. That is in here. So those two might be a little bit more aligned than what the other pieces of the bill are, because what was brought to me repeatedly was folks feeling that they didn't have access to talk at the meeting, or have access to somebody to a place to go to talk to someone at a meeting. They weren't always clear about how to remote in or call into a meeting. So to me, this was all about a thread of providing additional access for people to talk with their representatives, no matter what level that they're at. So to me, that was the string.
Assemblyman Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for another question, and I meant to ask this the first time. Assemblywoman, on page 5, Assemblywoman Considine, at the very bottom, I think this is still section 2, subsection 8. Yeah. And it speaks about remote technology and the requirement for members of the public to be able to phone in their public comment. And something I didn't know if you had heard from the there was a governmental entity in our area during COVID that originally began to allow that, but they began to get profanity and threats and so on called into the public comment line, and so then they changed their approach and allowed emails in during that time, but it was abused continually, and I'm wondering if you've given any consideration to that, because the problem with because I was on the school board at the time, and we were speaking with this entity as we were making decisions, is because you don't have to, there's no identification, your camera can be off, so people were really just using it to just go in, and it was really disruptive. And in fact, one time somebody called in a bomb threat, and they had to dismiss the meeting, and it was some really difficult things happened in terms of running the meeting and doing the people's business. I'm wondering if any consideration had been given to that.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Taylor. Venetia Considine for the record. First, I just want to point out, it was pointed out to me that this is already in the law, and this section is duplicative, so on the amendment, it's to remove that section. I am aware of actually that situation. It's a balance. I know it's difficult. This has happened during COVID. Many things happened for everyone that was first learning remote technology and using it. So I've been in a situation, not on any of these boards, but it's happened. But trying to balance with the public's right to access to meet with folks is a tough balance. I don't think I'm the right person to make decisions for how every jurisdiction or how every board or how every commission is going to deal with it, but I just want to have a baseline for access. And then the people who are experts in their area, wherever they are around the state, can decide the best way to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. May I follow up, Chair? Yes. Just so that, during COVID, they had permission to do some things differently because it was a lot during COVID. This just got so I'm aware that it's there. My question was around any potential changes to that. So as at this point, it remains in unless there was that same COVID exemption they had, unless you said, you mentioned it was in the amendment?
Well, if you're looking at section 8 on page 5, I was told that's already in the law and it's duplicative, so I was just going to take that out. Venetia Considine for the record. Happy to follow up with you and talk about this
We'll
if
talk
there's another way
Yep,
to
that's-
provide access, but also balance that out with
No,
the
it's a
people's
tough
right
balance.
to not be abused.
Well, yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I have a question regarding that. So we're saying we're going to remove section 8 on page 5. It's duplicative. Do you know where else in the statute it is?
Thank you, Chair. Venetia Considine for the record. I believe it's in NRS 241-020, section 3A2.
And I apologize because I would have to more thoroughly review that than just this moment. But I just want to make sure in that consideration that we expand that access to not just telephonic participation. Last session, we had done a lot to make sure that it was specifically for remote technology. And I think that this section actually does that. But I would like, if there is going to be an amendment, I want to make sure that that's very clear too, because we want to allow for, it might be telephonic participation, but in the future, that technology might change, so other remote technology should be approved.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. Again, this was a bill that was in response to another bill, so just trying to fix it in as narrow a way as possible without it expanding too far. But I do appreciate that because I was here last session, and we all now use remote technologies that are beyond the phone. So I will work with everyone on that.
If it makes you feel better, the chair's button also sometimes is hard to press. So I had another question. Members, were there any other questions before? Okay, I don't think so. So I did want to talk, going back to the public comment for multi-agendas. So I'm just wondering if that would apply to, like, I don't know, a board that decided to meet well into the evening in Southern Nevada and then continue to meet the next day. So for example, we have some local boards that are choosing to have meetings at 5 p.m. that last until 3 a.m. So how would this impact that? Because technically it would be a multi-day agenda, a meeting at that point.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Venetia Considine for the record. The intent for this change was specifically, my initial request in writing was that the meeting be broken by a day. The issue that was brought to me was meetings that would say, and I'm not that this is an exact example, but would be held on a Thursday and then would be continued to the next Tuesday, so that there were days in between. I had not contemplated that a meeting would go beyond midnight and would technically be into 2 days. If that is something that the committee would like to consider, happy to consider it. Again, just working out a way to balance to get the best stuff, in the law without losing the bill.
Thank you, and I look forward to working on that. I'm sure I heard some mumbling from the committee. It's definitely an issue that I know we've seen with some of our local governments, and I want to make sure that that government is transparent and accessible. And while we have 120 days to get work done, that's not true of our local government. So I don't know that they need to be having votes at 2 or 3 in the morning when the public has very limited, if any, access. I did have another question, if there were no other questions for the committee, regarding the amendment that requires the meetings to be to attend at least 25% of the meetings to be at the physical location, because I do have some concerns if that meeting was not, if the commission decided to meet or that committee decided to meet virtually for the majority of the meetings, then 25% of those meetings might not be physical. They might not be able to participate physically. And then if we have we have some state boards as well that might meet predominantly virtually. So how would that impact that?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Venetia Constein for the record. That's one of the reasons why I tried to have that threshold low, because if the majority of the meetings are held virtually, then ideally 25%, if it's 4 meetings a year, there's only 1 meeting that people would have to, or members would have to physically attend. The goal, again, was to provide access to folks who don't feel like they have been able to access their representatives at whatever level that they are. So this was more than 0, but less than anything. But again, happy to continue a conversation. If there's a way to thread the needle, happy to do it.
Thank you. Happy to continue that conversation as well. I do have some concerns specifically for some of these committees or boards that are not paid for that individual to have to travel and participate. It might make it more challenging for individuals from low-income communities to participate in these boards. I believe Assemblyman DeLong has another question.
Yes, more of a comment, Chair, and I ran a commission for 8 years and was on it for 16, and we had great participation from our members in the face-to-face meetings. I'm wondering, with this specific issue, is rather than trying to create a rule or a law that applies to all commissions, if there's an issue with a specific commission, should the law relating to that commission be changed? Rather than making it broad, maybe it should be specific and done in a different bill.
Well, I will very honestly say we have a bill that will be introduced by this committee shortly that has to do specifically with school boards, but I just want to make sure that we're not applying the same thing to. I just want to make sure that this law is consistent and we clarify that. Because otherwise, right now, as written, it would apply to all boards and commissions and governments.
Thank you, Chair. Venetia Constein for the record. I had spoken with someone who had an issue and talked about having a narrow amendment affecting a certain group. That person didn't come through with it, but again, I'm happy to discuss.
Thank you. I'm sure this will not be our last open meeting law conversation of the cycle, but I'm sure that Assemblyman Constein will be part of them. She's kind of she definitely takes the lead on a lot of our open meeting law things here in the building. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee members? No, I think you're all done. Thank you. At this time, I will invite anyone wishing to testify in support of AB 219.
Good morning, Chair Torres and committee members. I'm wearing my RPIN shirt today in honor, as a proud member of RPIN and in honor of RPIN Day at the Legislature, but I'm going to speak for NFA. Kent Irvin, K-E-N-T-E-R-V-I-N, for the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the Independent Statewide Association of Professional Employees at the Nevada System of Higher Education. We support AB 219. It cleans up some items related to the move towards virtual and hybrid meetings. We particularly appreciate the clarification about public comment on each day of a multi-day meeting. A certain board where we advocate for faculty issues regularly holds multi-day meetings as a single agendized meeting. At one of those, the Deputy Attorney General advising the board on open meeting law advised the chair to hold an extra public comment section at the end of the first day, just in the spirit of the open meeting law. It was the end of a long day, we didn't comment. On the morning of the next day, where we were kind of expecting a similar public comment, a different DAG advised the chair that it wasn't necessary because it wasn't on the agenda, and they had one at the beginning of the first day and the end of the second day. So this bill at least provides clarity and allows public comment on each day of a public multi-day meeting. While in support, I would suggest that the word consecutive in section 1 of the conceptual amendment is unnecessary and allows a potential loophole for a meeting that would be agendized on those non-consecutive days. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Muratkin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is also in support of AB 219. We thank the bill's sponsor for efforts in bringing additional clarity and to the adoption of AB 253 from last session. As you know, there were, of course, adjustments or growing pains from the COVID situation, of course, as we move forward with good governance and transparency. I would like to also clarify the Chamber is in support of the proposed amendment you see, specifically in regards to Section 1, subsection 4 and 5, and the new amendment you see in front of you. Regarding the conversations about the multi-day hearing, as we have seen with several situations with the state board, also the agenda items are moved around from day to day. Folks are trying to go from Las Vegas to Reno, Reno to Las Vegas. Those agenda items are then moved, and folks are missing an opportunity to provide comment on those meeting days, and that has been a concern from the Chamber on good governance. In regards to the overall intent of the bill, what we've seen in some of the state level boards or commissions is that there has not been an easy access for constituents and groups to call in on regulatory board meetings, or those agenda items are not complete. And we've seen situations where the Chamber has had to reach out to the director of a cabinet agency, like, unfortunately, we're not able to provide testimony. You have to then text that person who's an agency head and say, we're not able to provide testimony, the instructions are not there. And the Chamber has that privilege of being able to do that. But the average Nevadan doesn't have that access, and that's a concern for this organization, that the average Nevadan doesn't have that cell number to say, hey, why can't I provide public comment? Why is not instructions provided? And that's where that intent has come from. So we appreciate the bill sponsor trying in her efforts to provide public access for all Nevadans. And we look forward to additional bills this committee will hear on open meeting law. So thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions for Mr. Muradkin? Councilmember MacArthur, go ahead. Oh, he decided he didn't have any. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Muradkin. At this time, I don't see any additional support here in Carson City, and I do in Las Vegas, so when you're ready, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Barraga, MARIA-TERESA-LIEBERMANN-PARRAGA, and I'm here with Battleborn Progress here in support of this bill, and we thank the sponsor for it. We have, like the other speakers have said, we have had members too, and especially those local board meetings that go into the next day that cannot provide public comment but want to, but have difficulty having access because there's no baseline for that access across the state for the different local governments. So we support this bill because we have seen, especially with the legislature, with the increased access, we have increased participation, and we should all strive for that. So please support this bill.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of AB 219? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support of AB 219?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of AB 219, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT. As someone who makes and attends a lot of public meetings in your state, I appreciate the sponsor of this bill and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers on the line wishing to testify.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite anyone wishing to testify in opposition to AB 219. And given that the Early Rising Committee on Government Affairs did arise at 8 a.m. and we have 2 hours until we have to be at floor caucus, please feel free to have the time that you need to speak in opposition. Go ahead, when you're ready.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing us to speak on this item, Chairman Torres and members of the committee. It is early, and I'm grateful you're a hardworking committee. My name is Doug Ritchie. I'm the Chief Civil Deputy District Attorney for Douglas County. In that role, I'm County Counsel. I assist the Board of County Commissioners, the County Manager's Office. I've also had the opportunity to participate on the Governor's Open Meeting Law Task Force for over a decade through many sessions. I do not consider myself an expert on open meeting law, but I am very familiar with it. I also, in the county and the district attorney's office, supports the changes and the clarifications regarding public comment periods over multiple days. We also support transparency in government and facilitating public participation in the legislative process. There are, however, 3 areas of the bill that have perhaps unintended consequences that may actually thwart public transparency and participation. I'll start with the most obvious one that several members have mentioned, the 25% attendance requirement. The foundation for Nevada's open meeting law is transparency for elected bodies. The open meeting law is about the deliberations and actions by a quorum of its members of a public body. In other words, it's the collective action of a public body. If you go through all the definitions, it talks about a meeting as a gathering in which a quorum is present. Deliberation means to collectively examine, weigh, and reflect upon reasons for or against an action. Action means a decision made by a majority of its members. And finally, a public body means any administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body of the state or local government consisting of at least 2 persons. In other words, the whole foundation for Nevada's open meeting law is about collective action by a public body. It was a very insightful comment. Well, what happens if one member does not follow this? Under Nevada's current open meeting law, the body would be in violation of Nevada's open meeting law. Any action taken in violation of the open meeting law would be void. And moreover, the next agenda item, there have to be an agenda item where the public body acknowledges a violation of Nevada's open meeting law. As amended, what can happen is one single member of the public body can force a public body to be in violation of Nevada's open meeting law by simply refusing to attend more than the minimum number of meetings. Now, I think what has happened is there's been a confusion between responsiveness from elected officials or appointed members of a public body and transparency by that public body. And let me explain what I mean by that. We want the public to be able to understand why a public body does what it does. They want to see you deliberate. They want to see the votes. They want to see how the sausage is made. Whereas access to an individual member is about, being responsive either as an elected official or as an appointed member of a public body. But the way to handle that is if you're not responsive to your constituents, you will not be reelected. And if you're appointed member of a public body, the appointing body will probably remove you, as Assemblyman Gurr has mentioned I mean, it's very simple. If someone is not performing, that person will be removed. Again, this, I laud the intent behind this, but the unintended consequence is that the whole foundation of Nevada's open meeting law is about collective action, and this will now focus on an individual member and can subject the entire public body to censure for the actions of one member. There's another issue that came up. Section 3 proposes that a new paragraph 5 be added to require, quote, "a clear and complete instructions," end quote, to be, quote, "read verbally verbatim to allow the public to participate via remote technology if there's no physical location for the meeting." Currently, Nevada open meeting law makes it clear that the public body must provide to the public information regarding how, quote, how to use the remote technology system to hear and observe the meeting, to participate in the meeting remotely, and provide live public comment during the meeting, and if authorized by the public body, provide pre-recorded comments. That's in NRS 241.0203A. There's also another section in NRS 241.0231B. The public body shall be deemed to have complied with the requirements of this paragraph, public access to remote technology systems, if the public body provides the person with a web-based link and a telephone number in case of technical difficulties that allows the person in real time to attend and participate in the meeting. Requiring that the instructions be provided every time there's periods of public comment is redundant and unnecessary. If a member of the public has been able to successfully access a public body's remote technology system to listen to the public meeting and therefore hear the chairperson's verbatim instructions, then it's self-evident that the public body has complied with NRS 241.0203A and NRS 241.0231B, and perhaps most importantly, members of the public have been sufficiently informed how to use the public body's remote technology to participate in the public meeting. They're listening. In order to hear the verbatim verbal instructions, they had to be able to get on the system. Now again, requiring that the chairperson read verbally verbatim the instructions contained in the agenda, particularly, quote, before each period devoted to public comment, is redundant, does not further the goal of transparency, and provides multiple opportunities for the chairperson to misread the required verbatim instructions. As the chairwoman noted, her instructions on her sheet said yay instead of aye. An open meeting law violation would occur if a chairperson inadvertently did not read verbatim the required instructions. And although you may think, well, that's a hyper-technical violation, we get open meeting law complaints all the time for hyper-technical violations like that. If you don't literally read verbatim the instructions, you misphrase it, that is a violation of the open meeting law. I know that's not what's intended, but that's what's written. Again, I'll give you an example. For the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners, we believe in transparency. And so public comment is open at the beginning of the meeting. It's available at the end of the meeting. It's also available whenever there's a for possible action item. We believe in full transparency. Under the current language, it's unclear when this verbatim instruction has to be made. The language says, quote, before each period devoted to public comment. Well, on a light agenda for the Board of County Commissioners, they may have 15 items for possible action. So if you have 15 plus opening plus closing, that's 17 times the public is going to hear verbatim instructions on how to participate and use remote technology systems. I think the public is going to get tired of it, and perhaps more importantly, you need to remember that the chairperson is a layperson. They're not an attorney, they're just a regular guy or gal who wants to serve the public. This is at least 17 opportunities for them to mess up and violate the open meeting law, because under the proposed language, they have to read verbatim every time public comment is opened up, the instructions. Finally, there's a requirement that posting must occur at the building where the meeting will be held. That's in Section 2. It's proposed NRS 241.0204A. This requirement imposes a new and additional burden on public bodies without aiding transparency or facilitating public input. As this body may be aware, the open meeting law used to require that a physical agenda be posted at either the location of the meeting or the public body's principal place of business, as well as 3 prominent other locations. That's a total of 4. That was changed. There were a number of reasons for it. One was that we're killing a lot of trees. There's a lot of physically posting of these agendas without meaningfully adding transparency. Also, it created a lot of waste of staff time, as people would have to drive to the post office or the library or some other prominent place to post a physical agenda. Just to be clear, under the Nevada's open meeting law, currently agenda information is available to the public at least 5 different ways. Under NRS 241.0204, minimum public notice includes posting a copy of the notice at the principal office of the public body. I would submit that's the most logical place to post a physical agenda, the offices of the public body. 2, it must be posted on the official website of the state. 3, it must be posted on, if remote technology is going to be used, it has to be posted on the public body's internet website. That's 3. 4, it has to be sent to anyone who has requested a copy of the agenda. That's pursuant to NRS 241.0209. And finally, Nevada's open meeting law requires that the public body provide the name, contact information, and business address for a person designated by the public body, so that the public can get information regarding the agenda, including acquiring supplemental information, ADA accommodations. So there's 5 different ways that someone can receive an agenda. Now, again, there may be a temptation, what's the harm in having one more location? Let's require that it be posted at both the principal place of business as well as where the meeting occurs. Well, I will give you an example from Douglas County. In Douglas County, the Board of County Commissioners have been considering permits for transient occupancy. That's another way of licensing for vacation home rentals or short-term rentals. A lot of public interest in that, especially up at the Lake Tahoe. And so the board decided to hold a number of public workshops and public meetings, not in the county seat, Minden, but up at Lake Tahoe. Also, because of the anticipated public interest, the Board of County Commissioners decided they would rent casino hall space. That way, it'd be up at the lake, there'd be enough space so that everybody could participate. And it was standing room only for many of those meetings. How will a county be able to satisfy the posting requirements at the meeting when they have to deal with a casino? We will have to rely on management for the casino to post 3 days in advance the meeting. The county will be liable if casino management does not comply with the requirements of the open meeting law. But more fundamentally, is it reasonable to expect that a member of the public would go to a casino 3 days before a scheduled meeting to find out about that meeting, or any other commercial venue? Again, we are all for about transparency, but the practical effect of this would be, I would advise the Board of County Commissioners, don't hold that meeting up there, because it will be difficult, if not impossible, to post this agenda at a casino site 3 days before the meeting. It's not going to facilitate public participation, but it could easily get us into trouble. Again, there are multiple ways that a member of the public can access an agenda. They can call the office, they can go on the county website, they can go to the state website. Adding this requirement poses a lot of unintended consequences. If the committee or the sponsor believes that it's necessary that posting occur at the place of the meeting, I would suggest that at the very least, the language be revised to the old language, which is allow it to be posted either at the place of the meeting or the principal place of business, as well as all the other places that the public can go to access the agenda. Again, we support public access, transparency, but there are a number of unintended consequences in the current language of this bill. And for that reason, we would ask that at the very least, the language be revised to address some of these unintended consequences. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll open it up. Members, any questions? No, I think you were very thorough in your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Susan Fisher with McDonald Carano speaking this morning on behalf of the Nevada State Board of Osteopathic Medicine. I'd like to first apologize to the bill sponsor because I didn't talk to her about the bill before I had to come up here to oppose. Our board just met last night and voted on a package of bills to take positions on them because they have to do that in an open meeting as well. We are opposed to the bill, but only the Section 3, subsection 4, that requires in-person for 25% of the time. Our board's offices are in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas-based board members do meet in the office, but we do have a couple that are up here in Reno. Actually, our board president is here in Carson City. He's a physician here, and for him to he'd have to take a good portion of the day off to be able to travel to Las Vegas to be there. So he does call in for the meetings. Most of the other board members are in person. That would be a problem for us. If we do that, it's going to be, the fiscal note is $8,500 over the biennium. When I looked yesterday, I didn't see our fiscal note posted, but I know that it was submitted. So I do look forward to working with the bill sponsor, and if that issue is resolved, then we could move to neutral on the bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Torres and hardworking members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry with the City of Henderson. I'm here in opposition to AB 219, but would like to start by saying that as a representative of local government, we adhere strictly to Nevada's open meeting law and see the value of ensuring that the public has the ability to monitor and/or participate in public meetings and other activities governed by these statutes. We also appreciate the sponsor's ongoing work to modernize this law and account for changes in technology, and I appreciated her allowing me to share in advance of today's hearing that we have concerns with the bill. My opposition today is specific to Section 3, Sub 4. We believe that the 25% attendance requirement limits the flexibility that we currently have under the existing framework and could present a difficulty with small boards or those that meet infrequently. Also, it may not take into account specific situations that may limit an individual board member's ability to participate in person, such as health or mobility issues or other challenges, and could make it difficult to achieve a quorum necessary to conduct business. The vagueness surrounding the compliance question raised first by Assemblyman Gurr is also of concern. And finally, we believe that the city should maintain local control over our own board member attendance standards. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And I did want to let the committee know that the fiscal note has been updated probably this morning, so it is posted now. Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Cherry? I think you got off easy. Thank you. Members, I guess here in Carson City, is there anyone else wishing to testify in opposition to AB 219? Seeing none, I will go ahead and invite anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to AB 219. Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition to AB 219?
Chair, there are no callers on the line choosing to testify in opposition to AB 219 at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify neutral to AB 219 here in Carson City? Seeing none, BPS, or Carson City in Las Vegas first. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in neutral? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in neutral to AB 219?
Chair, there are no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you, and I'll go ahead and invite the bill sponsor up. The bill sponsor is good, so no closing remarks, so we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 219. I just would like to encourage stakeholders to continue to work together. I know that Assemblywoman Considine would like to make herself available to continue to work with you on this piece of legislation. At this time, I'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Is there anyone wishing to testify in public comment here in Carson City? Seeing none, is there anyone wishing to testify in public comment in Las Vegas? BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Callers, if you would like to testify and provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was murdered by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office during a mental health crisis. I am asking that you oppose SB 245 should it come before this committee. In the future, SB 245 equates to qualified immunity for law enforcement in Nevada. When police kill your loved one, the only form of redress and attempt to deter police violence available is through civil lawsuits. Often police withhold information from families, and the only way to obtain the information is through a civil lawsuit. Far too many cases end before they ever truly begin because of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is the barricade to truth, justice, and accountability, and allows for there to be no mechanism to hold the bad actors accountable. Accountability is good for everyone and is a positive, proactive choice to take personal ownership of existing problems and potential solutions. Why is it that those who have the power to take a human life when they go to work aren't interested in accountability for themselves? They hold community members accountable every single day, and some pay the ultimate price, being tried, convicted, and executed by police for being mentally ill, like my brother Thomas. In federal law, qualified immunity absolves police of liability even when they violate someone's constitutional rights if their actions are deemed to have been objectively reasonable. This mirrors language that is in SB 245. If police in Nevada thought hog tying my 140-pound, non-combative, non-violent, mentally ill brother who simply asked for help and hog tied him for over 40 minutes and asphyxiated him to death, and they thought that was reasonable, I ask you, what is not reasonable to officers in Nevada? Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability from law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, BPS. Next caller.
Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. Members, any additional remarks? So tomorrow, just so members know, we do have a pretty busy day. We'll be here again at 8 in the morning at Assemblyman MacArthur's request. So we will be in room 4100. I do expect for us to have some lengthier presentations tomorrow as well, just so members are aware. Thank you. At this time, the meeting is adjourned.